Hello everybody, it's Tommy and welcome back to another speed build for the Disney Save. Today we are starting our first build for the final movie of Sulani, which will be Peter Pan. There is about 4 lots, I believe, give or take, with the last couple of lots that we're doing for Sulani, and of course we're gonna have some residentials as a part of that. There are some favorites of mine personally, characters that are coming up in the very near future here, but I wanted to get one of these like big builds out of the way. This is a build I have been thinking about for a very long time because my fiance, way back before Sulani was ever even going to be, this was a build that he had recommended we try to do, and it's a tough build. Like, this is probably top 5 most difficult builds that I have ever personally done. So the idea always from the very beginning was we had to have a Skull Rock nightclub. This is that rock structure from Peter Pan. There's a whole scene in the film. Captain Hook takes Tiger Lily to the inside of this rock. The tide is sort of coming in. He's gonna drown her, that type of thing. You know, good old classic old style Disney, where things that used to happen in Disney films would literally never be allowed nowadays. That kind of a deal. And it's just this big rock that looks like a skull. Obviously, it's still supposed to be a rock, so it's not perfect. It has that like organic look to it. And why not make it sort of like a villain nightclub? But we've done that before, so let's do it more like a pirate villain nightclub. And we have Tortuga Tavern, which is like a bar, but this is a nightclub. There's many other Sims that could come here. It's just a different vibe, an alternative, if you will. And it's also a replacement option for this lot because we did do this lot already. This is the exact same lot that the Catfish Club goes on. That is the Little Mermaid nightclub that we built for this same space. So it's going to be a lot replacement option. Now, I will have by default Skull Rock come with the save file, mostly because I mean, I love how it turned out. Obviously, it is one of my favorite builds from Sulani so far, but because of like the rock placement and the debug objects, placing that kind of thing off of the gallery is not always the easiest thing to do. So I just think that this needs to be like there in the save file, easily accessible. No one has to worry about it coming off of the gallery correctly. Whereas the other one is more of like an actual structure in a building and it will move off of the gallery a little bit better than this one will. They're completely different vibes. The other one is a secret nightclub meant more for mermaids. It's got lots of colors. It's got like all these abandoned towers and sort of things going on. If you haven't seen the build video for it, definitely check it out. It's in the Disney Save playlist linked down below. This one ends up being completely underground and it's got the darker sort of piratey vibes. It's got lots of bedroom spaces for whatever you may need that for. And actually there's a lot more to come. There's some really cute details downstairs that I want to explain, but I first have to just tell you how close this build was to just never existing, because the version that you're seeing on screen is, I think, the 5th version of me trying this, and it was the last. Let me promise you that. This was like, I'm doing it this way. It's the way that, like, at the end of the day, I didn't want to do it this way, and if it doesn't work, it's done. I'm scrapping the build. I have a beautiful build that already goes on this lot. No one's going to miss it if they didn't know what could have been. Now, the reason that this was so challenging is because I originally went into it with the idea that the nightclub should be inside of the skull. So I sort of was creating a structure right in the middle of the lot, maybe leaving a little bit of room in front for water, because in the film the rock is ultimately like sort of in the middle of the ocean, and I wanted it to feel like it at least had water near it and a pond, that kind of an idea. So I left a little bit of water in the front, made it like a pool. It's kind of a nightclub feature. Sims like the pools, and then the club itself was the skull, which meant I had to have multiple levels to it. It had to have walls, but then I'm also trying to use debug rocks to give the shape of a skull, and I was morphing the rocks in and out of the wall so that when you went up and down the different levels, that would pull the rocks down so you could see into the build a little bit better. Because otherwise, if I just stack a bunch of rocks on top of one another and you do, like, you go down to level 1 or down to level 2, all the rocks will still kind of just sit and float in the air and you wouldn't be able to see inside the build and actually interact with anything. So something you can do is put rocks like kind of halfway into the walls and on the grid on the given level that you're working with, and then when you go down to another level or you go up, it will remove those rocks from view so that you can actually see and play inside the build. But that meant that I had to work with like round walls in general, and I'm trying to get this very organic shape with straight surfaces, and even the round walls were not helping. And then I started creating like a few versions where I'm like, okay, it's gonna look a little bit more like a building, but it's going to have a skull shape to it. And then that way you get the idea. But it looked just too cartoony, and almost like if you know Squidward's house from SpongeBob, that's kind of the vibe that it was giving. Like, it wasn't terrible, but it was definitely not what we were actually going for here. Whenever I make builds for the save file, I'm trying to get as close to the actual reference as possible. And this wasn't something where I could get away with like not making it look like I had a reference. Everyone knows what Skull Rock looks like, and it was just, it looked a little funny. I almost settled with it ultimately, but ultimately I knew I wasn't happy with it. It wasn't the vision I had. I wanted this like actual rock structure, and it just looked funny. I'm not gonna lie, it wasn't one of my best things I've ever built, and I was really set on, I'm done. I'm not doing this again. I was really frustrated. I spent the literal entire day doing this. I got up nice and early. I knew this was a really big build for Peter Pan. There was two really huge builds that I knew were going to take a lot of time, and I'm kind of on like a little bit of a schedule right now. I'm trying to get Sulani done by a certain date for me personally, so I knew I had to have Skull Rock done by the end of that night was like the goal. And so I just tried and tried all day long. I had 4 or 5 different versions going, and I wasn't happy with it. Really angry and frustrated actually, because I've taken a long break from building. I was recently in the US for like 4 months, and it's just, I came back and I feel like a little rusty, and this is like a really big thing to take on. And then you start to sort of question yourself a little bit. I'm like, maybe I'm just not a good enough builder to pull something like this off. Like, someone else could do this, but it's not me. And then it's like, it's a frustrating thing, right? To feel like you're not good enough to pull something off, like you can't do it. And I went and had dinner and sat on it and was like really mad and beyond frustrated. I'm not gonna lie. My fiance was trying to console me a bit. He didn't really like the other builds that I created either. He was being very nice about it, but neither of us like loved it. And I went and debugged for a while and was looking at different rocks, because I was originally also using like a completely different set of rocks. And then I really dug through the catalog and was like, okay, let's start over, but this is the last time. This is it. If it doesn't work out this way, we're done. It's not meant to be. And that also meant I knew what I was going to be doing this time around, is creating a structure where it's just the rocks are being used to make the skull rock, but then you kind of have like an underground entryway inside of the skull to an underground nightclub. Then the top and the rest of the area up top can be a little water lagoon area. We got some crocodiles going from Peter Pan. We've got fireflies, some shipwrecks, some pieces of like old pirate ships around, really pretty and kind of fun. But the actual entryway to the Skull Rock nightclub is around the other side of the skull. There's a hole in the back. You go in there and you go downstairs, and then I can create basically whatever I want downstairs. Again, the original idea was to actually have the skull be the nightclub, which is why I was so stuck on like trying to make that work. But once I pivoted to this idea and saw the result of doing the actual skull, I loved it. I think it's so cute. It's not perfect, but it's not meant to be, because it's sort of like when you look at clouds and you think to yourself, that cloud looks like this, but it's not that, right? So you look at this rock and you would look at it and think, that looks like a skull, but it's not actually a skull. So there's many different things about it. It's not perfect. It's got like a little bit of an off shape to it. It's got maybe a hole in the head, a hole in the side here and there. But when you look at it, it does look like a skull. And then people around, and it would sort of become known as Skull Rock. It all makes sense. Now I chose a pond upstairs specifically because I know I mentioned earlier that it was originally going to be a pool, but Sims are so drawn to pools, and the idea is the nightclub is downstairs, and I want you guys to wait till you see what's going on downstairs. We got all sorts of fun stuff downstairs. So there's no reason for anybody to be hanging out up here. This is the entryway. This is the decor, if you will, and all of the fun, the nightclub life is downstairs, including the pool. There is a pool down here, and it does have crocodiles in it. Kind of funny, kind of scary. It's perfect for this sort of vibe. You go downstairs, and I love building underground. It is one of my favorite things, because it doesn't matter what the shape of the upstairs is like. I can morph this downstairs area to be whatever I need it to be, and that's a very rare opportunity in The Sims. I create a lot of spaces that are more supposed to be like, I'm stuck with the outside structure. It has to look this way. It's iconic, especially like a Disney film, right? You're giving me something where people know what it looks like. They can tell you just based off of like looking at the exterior. So it has to look a certain way. And then I'm stuck filling in what is supposed to be inside of that interiorly while trying to maintain the exterior shape. But this is a completely different scenario. I can literally just do whatever I want. And since it's a pirate nightclub, we need a dance floor. We had to have a little pirate ship dance floor here with the pieces from Get Famous making like a little makeshift pirate ship on the floor here. And they're big items, so I kind of like had to work my way around that. I also knew I wanted the crocodile pool, and I also knew I wanted to have some bedrooms down here, because let's be honest, it's none of my business what you do with these bedrooms, but they give you a little bit more versatility when you're actually playing in a nightclub. You can stay for a bit longer, take a nap if you will. It's none of my business. But also it's a pirate nightclub, right? So we're thinking tavern vibes. We're thinking something similar to Tortuga Tavern. We had the bedroom on that lot as well. Do with it what you will. I also knew I wanted lots of decor. A lot of these pieces are very large. Like I mentioned, these pirate ship pieces from the Get Famous sets. There's a couple of items from the Cats and Dogs kit that are like these nautical items. We've got the giant anchor on a rock. I wanted an area where your Sims could gamble, because of course that's very in line with, you know, pirates. We have to have a huge bar, and not just like one that you walk up to. It has to almost be one of those ones that sits all the way around, like they're seating on the sides in a big circle. It creates like this vibe of what you would kind of imagine for something like this. But then we also, or I wanted like areas that were more tucked away and hidden, because you gotta have that variety for a space like this. You've got a lot of Sims that are all sorts of different personalities, but a lot of them are going to be a little bit more abrasive personalities. And especially for some of the like dedicated Peter Pan pirates that are coming up, I'm basically picking some of the worst traits that the save has to offer and mixing them to all different kinds of concoctions. So when you have like some of the worst Sims in a given space like this, you might want some room, just different areas for people to sort of like get away from one another. And then you might have some areas where you really want them to sort of be able to like hear each other, eavesdrop, do a little storytelling, meet some other Sims. And of course, other people will pop up here, right? There's nothing that I can do to really stop other Sims that don't fit the vibe of this place from coming here. I'm sure Charlotte LaBeouf will pop in here, because every time I play my save file, she does. It is her thing to do. She's gonna go to a nightclub at night or a bar. She's gonna pop up somewhere. But I did recently find, and I've been talking about this forever, but I finally found an actual mod that makes it so you can lock Sims to certain worlds. This is something I just wish was a part of the game, because it's really how I have personally designed this save file. It would be so nice if I could just say, when I click on a Sim, before I move it into a household, or it's in like the that place on the overhead map where you can see all of your households in game, you just had like a tag system where it showed all of the worlds by default, and then you could sort of just like get rid of some of them and make it so this character only is allowed to spawn in these worlds. So we've got some characters that are locked to their given environment. And so then maybe I could stop a little bit of some of those things. Like you wouldn't see Charlotte LaBeouf pop up in Sulani, because I don't think she would spend a ton of time here, and there's no other Princess and the Frog characters here at all in general. But then it also gives the versatility of having Sims be able to cross over worlds if they want to. Like I want to be able to not just lock them to one world, but maybe pick a couple worlds that they're allowed to go into. So when we do have those movies that cross worlds, like I'll just tell you guys right now, obviously I'm doing Peter Pan here in Sulani, but I will 100% be doing Peter Pan at least a little bit in Brightchester. Wendy Darling and her family will not be a part of the Create a Sim and the things that we have coming up for the next couple of Peter Pan videos. But I would love obviously for her to be able to come here. So if I like had her character and her family, but not the parents, like just John and Michael and her, be able to come to Sulani and explore, and you would see them sort of out and about, that would make sense, right? There is a mod. I'll see if I can find it and link it, because I know people are going to be interested once I bring this up, and it does allow you to literally do just that. You get to lock characters to certain worlds, and the way that people were describing it on Twitter is that it is multi-world, so you can pick like a couple worlds that character is allowed to be seen in. So the end goal for the save file, when I do like the final video or videos, I'm planning on doing like at the very end when everything's complete, and I hopefully don't have to do too many updates, but I'm sure I will, and all the worlds are done, and I'm really, really satisfied, and I'm like, like, this is the save. This is it. We're done for the most part. As long as The Sims is going and releasing new packs and new worlds, I will keep going with it. And I think as long as they're updating it for the most part, I'll try to update it as well, just so I can keep everything working. That final big tour video for the save file will probably be done with like my must-have mods list. And as long as that one is still working and it works the way that I'm describing, that will most definitely be one of them. To be able to lock my townies specifically to certain worlds where they have no business spawning anywhere else, that is an absolute must. The other absolute must, honestly, is going to be being able to turn the vacation worlds into residentials. There's a lot of characters. So many of you are going to be upset with me for basically making households and then like making the characters that live inside them townies, and then saying, you know, if you have a mod that this works properly, but if you don't, then it doesn't work as intended. It's going to be a vacation home. There's just nothing I can do about that. Some big households, some big characters that I personally also am like, no, I wish I could find any way to, maybe even if we get a new world and I can move that character to a world where I'm actually able to live inside the household and play inside the household. But other than that, it's going to require a mod. And then, yeah, I want to showcase this save file as it's truly intended to be, with a couple of must-have mods, not anything crazy, not like a huge list, but there's going to be some stuff like that that you just absolutely have to have in order to experience it properly. And if you don't have it, or you're maybe like playing on consoles and things like that, it's not going to be, you know, make or break. Hopefully I have given enough for all of the decor and the builds and everything, the characters, their personalities. It'll hopefully keep you entertained enough and be good enough as it is, but there's some things that just would be so nice if we could change them, and I'd like to showcase it the way that I like truly envision it. One fun little feature that I want to point out, in case you missed it there, about the pool crocodile area, I did put a plank. No, you can't use it. It is a piece of debug wood, but we don't have diving boards anyway, so it's as good as it's gonna get. It's kind of cute. It's kind of fun. We can't have like water without a plank on it. Walk the plank, you get it. And then the theming in here is obviously red, but more so like jewel tones, like those sapphires, emeralds, bright garnets. Captain Hook is really whom I'm picturing when I am creating the area, so I went heavier with some of the red furniture, trying to keep it in line with one another, but also thinking to myself, like, how much do pirates sit and think and care about like the chairs matching and everything sitting correctly? It's not really that kind of a vibe. Things are a little bit more sporadic and sort of here and there, and maybe you've got some bar stools that are from one pack and from another, because again, this would be like a collection of random furniture and things like that. It's not the nicest place on earth, and it's definitely not meant to be. The pirate ship dance floor in the middle, it seems really dark when you look at it, and there is a lighting issue. It's just like a game issue when you bring some of those like bigger objects indoors, and specifically like some plants and things that you're just really not supposed to have inside. It doesn't allow the light to go through the object or show the way that it's supposed to. I tried putting lights underneath it to help, because sometimes that will fix it. Like when you have plants and you place them inside and then they just go kind of dark, it's a game issue. It's just something that they've never fixed. So I was having a similar problem with that here. To me, it doesn't ruin it enough to remove it. Like, it's dark, yes, but that's the vibe of the whole place. So it still looks pretty good to me, but that's kind of why it's appearing that way, if you were wondering. For the music in here, because all nightclubs and bars require some music item, it's always a challenge to try to pick what we actually want to do. Some, it makes sense where we can maybe have like a couple of instruments out and then Sims can just play them, or you can hire somebody to use those items, and then you get live music, and that makes sense, right? But for a place like this, you almost picture like kind of like pub music is the only way I can describe it, and there really isn't an option as far as I'm aware in the game of something that's similar to that. If anybody's more familiar with like the music options in The Sims 4 and you think I'm wrong, please correct me and let me know, because I'm desperate to like find something that actually fits the vibe for a place like this. In the past, and I think for the Tortuga Tavern, this is what I did. I believe I picked tropical music. Given that we're in Sulani, and I believe it's a music type that comes with Sulani, it's one of the better choices in my opinion, but it's not really like the vibe of what I'm going for. Like, I'm almost picturing just like background pirate sort of music. I guess like music you would hear when you go in a pub that's like nondescript, no lyrics, bagpipes, English, Scottish, bush, that sort of vibe. And I don't believe there is an actual given category for anything like that, but I do still have to put music. So one of the options is to use speakers, and then it will just sort of like shout that type of music genre out into the given area. But for this one, I decided, since I already used the island music for Tortuga Tavern, we would go with something different, and I decided to go with spooky music. I know some people are not gonna like that, but again, it's kind of like a little villains area, and it was one of the only things that I was happy with, because when the other choices are literally like pop and rock and roll and tween music, what am I supposed to do with that? So I had to pick anything that I felt like I could get away with at least a little bit. This looks so much better considering that I am actually able to do the ceilings the correct colors and tones. It doesn't ruin the screenshots for my builds. Now, something I used to say to patrons all the time is please ignore the ceiling, because obviously like it ruins the vibe for a place like this where you wouldn't just have like a white ceiling. It would be either made of brick or stone or wood, and it kind of helps just bring the whole build together. So of course I've been trying to remember to add that to all of my new builds, but I do, and again, this is why it's time to update the save file. I have to go back and update all of my other builds and redo all of the ceilings. Some of them will just be white ceilings, and that's great, but most of what I build is a little bit more fantasy related, and I feel like because of that, you don't get that ceiling type, unfortunately. That's gonna be more so in like your standard residentials. I'm picturing like Andy's house, Toy Story. I can probably get away with it in some of those spaces, not even in some of that either. Add that to the long list of things that I really need to do with the new save file. There were so many new features that have been added since my Mount Komorebi version has come out, so there will just be a lot of work that goes into it. Don't worry, I'm not missing those little details. There's lots of little things that I sort of forget here and there, and then I'll remember and go back and add, but those bigger lifestyle changes to the save file where we've got to go back and do all the ceilings, I do remember, so I'm going to be going back and fixing all of that for the save. And now you can sort of see what I mean here with this huge bar right in the middle on either side of the stairs. It goes all the way around. Sims can sit on those longer bar tables or just like up directly against the bar. This isn't in the video, but I actually added some planks that go across from both stairs, and then some more clutter items on top of that, kind of like an overhead thing around the bar, because I feel like that's very typical when you go in to a bar in general. There's usually like an area up top, even if it's like wood and cupboards or if it's just random clutter that the bartenders use. I wanted to have something there, so there's like chests and extra crates and extra little kegs and things over their heads in the bar area as well. And then there's also this gambling area, very tiny in the corner here. It's kind of closed off, got some curtains to hide it away, give some privacy at least a little bit. Two different types of those. Actually, it's the same. It is the same poker table or gambling table. I used a lot of them, like the different varieties of ones in the Tortuga Tavern build. So for this one, I just stuck with like the regular one, especially because one of them is Sabacc, which is a Star Wars game. So I did include it in the other build for fun, but for this one, I was like, okay, we can just kind of leave that. And that is going to be the end of today's speed build. I hope you guys liked Skull Rock. I hope you're excited for more of the Peter Pan stuff to come. If you'd like to support the Disney Save on Patreon, you can do so by clicking the link in my description box down below or the one at the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will talk to you all in the next one.